Tansi, good evening. My name is Sakawis, also Christine Nobis, and I'm Plains Cree Salto of the George Gordon First Nation in Saskatchewan. And I am living in Iowa and the founder of Great Plains Action Society. And today we are doing an Indigenous-centered forum on the recent catastrophic event that happened in Mead, Nebraska, where the AltEn ethanol plant discharged 4 million gallons of contaminated wastewater generated by this facility when a pipe broke on February 12th. But that's just like, one issue that this plant has been having for ages. There's also huge, massive stockpiles of pesticide-laden seed corn that's been building up there for years that is contaminating the environment around it. And many other issues that have to be dealt with. And so, we have Indigenous relatives at the front lines in Nebraska that have been documenting this disaster since day one. And we've put together a video to explain what's happening. And we have Indigenous guests here today to talk about this catastrophe, this environmental catastrophe, and we want to honor Indigenous perspectives, particularly when it comes to these terrible things happening for the sake of colonial capitalism, colonial farming practices, what have you, on stolen land. With that being said, I would like to honor the Omaha people as this terrible catastrophe has happened on their lands. And I want to say, that frankly, I'm sorry. This is really terrible. And we need to do something more. We need to be better. And we need to listen to Indigenous perspectives on these matters for sure. On the ground, from the very beginning, was Mahmoud Fatil, who is Indigenous Crimean Tatar, and I am going to add him to the stage right now so that we can start the discussion about what exactly we're talking about today, and to describe, with quickly, or I don't know, not so quickly, about what's going on.
All right, nice to be here with you guys today. Sikawas, thank you for the introduction. Basically, what we had was we were part of the Nebraska Stand Collective, and we were out there scouting the pipe KXL that they were planning to build Trans-Canada, a tar sands pipe out of Alberta, Canada. As you all know, about the 19th or so of January, Joe Biden, on his first day of the inauguration, went ahead and signed an executive order on the environment and science, which effectively terminated that project, yanking the permits. So we beat KXL again for the second or third time after fighting it for about a decade, over a decade of probably 12 years or so, since some of the very first people started getting involved in that fight. Around about the same time, we started getting some messages from researchers at the UNL facility right there, the agricultural research facility, as well as some concerned individuals from Mead, Nebraska, and some employees of the actual AltEn facility as well. Doing what we do, we protect land and water, having been up at Standing Rock and the whole legacy that had provided for us. So it was a natural transition to say, well, KXL is kind of winding down. We'd spent all this time fighting that pipeline in order to protect the water from a potential leak, all right, the Ogallala Aquifer. What we did was we found out that the AltEn facility out there in Mead has actually been polluting the aquifer and the groundwater of Nebraska, the Ogallala Aquifer, the Todd Valley Aquifer, probably since at least 2015. What they have done is a little bit unique regarding ethanol plants. Normally, the process involves converting grain into ethanol alcohol, which is similar to brewing alcohol or so on and so forth. And they use some yeast and they convert the starches and sugars into alcohol. Byproduct is methane, and then of course they have some distillers grains that are left over. With regard to AltEn, perverse incentive of money and capitalism has led them to go down a road which is untraveled by many. Unique to their facility, they've decided to start using pesticide-laced seed corn rather than field corn, as most outfits would do, The effect of that is that the pesticide-laden seed corn then turns into pesticide-laden wet cake, which is a non-edible form of distiller's grain or leftover waste remnants of the grain that's used to produce ethanol. Okay, and what we had there was the wet cake was actually still laden with pesticide. The heat process, the boiling off, and so on and so forth was not enough to denature the pesticide, and it was still laden in the wet cake, which was then, the company figured, well, of course it was laden with pesticide. It's toxic material. Typically, what brewers will do and other ethanol plants that use field corn, source seed grain or field grains, is that they'll go ahead and sell it on a secondary market, and they'll do so to animal, like Purina, like a dog food producer. They'll sell it as livestock feed for cows and pigs and so on like that. But obviously, with all that pesticide in there, they couldn't be selling that because people's livestock would get sick and die. So what they decided to do is get a little crafty, and they decided to sell it as soil conditioner. The reasons for doing so are because largely soil conditioner is an unregulated product in the state of Nebraska. Nobody was checking into it. And, there are some things like phosphates and so on still left in that wet cake. So they decided, hey, we'll start spreading it out on fields, and that'll be our solution to get rid of it. Now, the reasons I mentioned perverse incentive in capitalism and so on earlier were because they were sourcing the material, which is, a commodity traded on Chicago Mercantile for all intents and purposes. Prices fluctuate. I don't know if you're familiar with rural areas or farming, but you'll often hear, the yield will cost this or the yield will cost that, or they'll get this at market or they won't get that at market. And the cost is always fluctuating. Well, what they have done here is, as a manufacturer, they've taken out their cost for resource or their cost for sourcing their raw materials, because largely these pesticide-laced seed were treated as toxic waste that had to be disposed of as a hazardous material. Now, what they have done is to essentially take that seed corn, that pesticide-laced and fungicide-laced seed corn, off the hands of some of these large agro producers like Bayer and Syngenta, who are very happy to get rid of it, because imagine that you turn from a point of paying to dispose of or discard a toxic waste into being able to just get rid of it for free. Obviously, that's a benefit to them. It increases their bottom line. It reduces their costs, operational costs, and otherwise. Unfortunately for us, the individuals at AltEn decided to spread it out on fields and call it, soil conditioner. Well, what this did is it had the effect of spreading around the toxin as well. According to the EPA, 70 parts per billion is what's safe for some of these pesticides. They're a class of pesticide neurological agent known as neonicotinoids. And what they do is affect the nervous system of different animals, insects primarily. And but also, larger vertebrates as well, as we're coming to find out from the Mead experiment or disaster. And what they've done is they went ahead and they put that seed corn in there. They're getting it for free, and they were producing ethanol, selling that at market rate, making a lot of money. And then they were turning around and trying to sell this as a soil remnant, soil conditioner, and making even more money while they're actually poisoning the lands of all these farmers. The Department of Agriculture, once they were hip to the game, because largely some people's livestock, some people's private pets and animals are getting sick after having ingested this corn. Once the Nebraska Department of Agriculture was made aware, they went ahead and ordered a cease and desist to AltEn, saying you cannot do this anymore. You can't spread this around. The pesticide concentrations are out there. The EPA had regulated, said 70 parts per billion was found to be safe. And the types of numbers that they're checking around the AltEn facility are 240,000. That's several magnitudes of order larger than what's safe for, people, as well as animals, large vertebrates, and insects. So really what they did was they said, well, shucks, we can't go ahead and sell it and distribute it as soil remnant. So we're just going to go ahead and stockpile it on our land, because, again, that perverse incentive of receiving that seed corn for free, that raw source material to produce their product, their manufacturing product, the ethanol, it was just such a, it was too great to shy away from. So they didn't really know what to do with the toxic waste. They really needed to contract with a landfill or a responsible entity to go ahead and, get rid of that, process it or storage it or, trash it in a safe, ecologically sound manner. And they just decided to stockpile it in big, mounds or pyramids, I guess, on the actual premises. And we got to a point where we've got several tons, from the point when the Nebraska Department of Environment and Energy told them to stop, and the Department of Agriculture told them to stop selling the soil remnant, the soil conditioner. They actually, in 2021, when they went back, the state shut them down, found that they had up to 3 times the amount that they had on the premises when they were ordered to stop this practice. Now, it's kind of a loophole, therefore it's not regulated well. There was nothing written on the book saying that they could or couldn't do this, but the state was indicating to them that, it wasn't safe, it wasn't good for public health, and they shouldn't be doing it. They weren't direct and overt saying that they had to just shut it down entirely. They did indicate you got to stop spreading it out on fields, and they had hoped, I guess, that they would start disposing of it in a sound and ecologically safe manner. But again, they just piled it up like people would pile up maybe wood chips or gravel on the property. They didn't even put down any pebble barrier or anything like that. It's just directly on the soil. And I mean, it went to something like 840,000 tons, some kind of ridiculous number. Big mounds, larger than homes and things like that. In addition to that, they had a couple wastewater lagoons out there, 3 of them, I believe. And 2 of them were badly in disrepair. You can see, we'll show you some footage here in a little while of the actual liner that's supposed to be separating, creating a barrier between the ground and the wastewater, which is laced with pesticide, the Neonicotinoids pesticides. And that liner had been floating ever since, I guess, the lagoons had been in operation. We've heard, in verbal testimony from Miss Jody Wabel, one of the local residents of Mead and somebody who had been involved in the town governance for some time. And, sure enough, here in 2021, after 2015, 2017, they'd been reported to have some, interactions with the state. They still had the damaged liners. And that was one of the tall tale things that the state said, nope, you're not in compliance. We're going to go ahead and fine you. We're going to shut you down. In total, I believe they had something like 77 violations and citations by the state of Nebraska. And it's very telling that the state of Nebraska is also derelict in their responsibility, because over 30 of those were issued since January of 2021. Now, a little bit before the story broke and the big Guardian interview and things like that, we had been out there, as we mentioned, we had been contacted by some researchers and some other folks that were concerned, residents of the area of Mead, Nebraska, out there in Saunders County. And we had gone out there. We had actually had a number of, off the record interviews with some folks. And they were detailing to us, just how sad it was. And indeed, up to 10 miles away, you can smell this peculiar and putrid odor emanating from the plant. And, the entire surroundings, it's enough to churn your stomach, actually. So we went down there, we were getting some footage, and we were looking around, and it really, was eye-opening for us to see just the level and magnitude, the industrialization of the poisoning of the land and water down there. And it was really something that was, it kind of shook me, because we're sitting here 10 years trying to protect that aquifer in the water here in Nebraska from the KXL and a proposed or a presumed spill that would eventually happen and threaten our drinking water. And the whole time, this big ag was in operation, full swing, and under the guise of being a recycler of toxic seed corn, pesticide-laced seed corn, and irresponsible business practices, derelict business operation. These people were actually spoiling the groundwater, in and around Meade County, Todd Valley Aquifer. Certainly there's Army Corps of Engineers water testing wells there. They've all tested positive. Early indications show to being laced with pesticide as well. This pesticide is everywhere. You can walk around, the ground looks green, there's a little haze, it stinks everywhere. They've been covering it and churning manure and dirt into it to kind of make it look a little less funky. It looks very neon green. Nothing at all of it looks natural or at all at place. It kind of looked like Mars. The first couple of times we were out there and seen it. What you'd envision something a distant planet or something like that. But we went out there and we were just astonished. We were shocked and awed, and it was really gross and captivated our attention. And shortly thereafter, I believe on or about the 12th of February, we received word from somebody that the actual wastewater tank, that stored up to 4 million gallons of produced wastewater, again, full of this pesticide-laced produced water, was was ruptured. You know, we had that good cold snap here when the polar vortex went down. What was it, February 12th or so, I believe, February 13th, that weekend. And actually, they claimed that a pipe burst. For all intents and purposes, we're going to have to roll with that. We don't know anything else about that. I'm sure the state will be doing some investigation. But when the pipe burst, it went ahead and led to all 4 million gallons of that being released just onto the land. It actually created a brand new wastewater lagoon, you know, on its own, all right, when it's leaked, because there's so much water just inundated the facility. And it went ahead and spilled out and ran a little stream in between their cattle operation down to the drainage. The drainage went down to the creek. I believe it's called Johnson Creek out there. And the Johnson Creek led about 4.5 miles out to the Platte River. Now the Platte River is 10 miles out, so the produced wastewater spill reached approximately halfway to the river, and nobody was doing anything. We went out there, we took a live feed, we were shocked. We saw, you know, there's a couple dead carcass of looked like very large vertebrates or deer or maybe perhaps bovine. And there were several raccoons dead, there were birds laying around, things like that. And the water just stank, it was putrid, -15, -20 degrees outside. And it was actually melting everything it came into contact with, sort of like what you'd expect of a de-icer. Certainly that was alarming to us, caused us to put our full energy and attention into it, and enlisted some support of other collective members to continue monitoring it, you know, throughout the following weeks. We went out, followed all the way up through the 28th of February, knowing that they had a March 1st deadline established by the state to clean up all of the solid waste off of the land and to clean up all of the produced wastewater out of the leaking lagoons in order to have the lagoons be repaired. As of the 28th of February, none of that had been done. It looked like they had cleaned up very little, if any, at all of the solid waste. And of course, all of the wastewater was still in those funky lagoons. It was just shocking, the level of, I don't know, the flippant amount. They just didn't care. It seemed like they didn't care what the state told them. They didn't care what any regulatory body was telling them, and they just did as they pleased, and they continued going on, externalizing the risks, it turns out, to the entire community and the entire state of Nebraska. You know, it was very unfortunate. And now we're learning that we may not know for several years, you know, the ultimate impact here. And what we do know is that just directly southeast on the Platte River is where Lincoln, Nebraska gets their water intake from. So all of the municipal water of Lincoln, Nebraska is potentially at risk. The municipal water of Western Omaha is at risk, and several of the communities along the way, Ashland, Wahoo, Fremont, I believe, to name a few. And that's a very scary thing to see that it, you know, we don't know really how far or how extensive the pollution has gone, but we do know that, you know, it was halfway to one of the largest population centers in the states drinking water. And nobody could do anything. The state really didn't have an idea of what to do. They didn't have an emergency plan. AltEn did not have an emergency plan. It was really sort of pathetic that there was a group of water protectors out there on a cold ass night, and there was nobody else out there trying to do anything. There were no mitigations efforts done by AltEn whatsoever. The only mitigation efforts that were being done were by the University of Nebraska Lincoln's Eastern Nebraska Research Facility, Agricultural Research Facility. And what they were doing was dumping a bunch of debris into the culverts to try to stop the flow or stymie the flow enough to prevent it from crossing over onto their lands. Of course, it did ultimately cross over onto their lands, traveling 4.5 miles away. And I believe it also risked or potentially damaged or poisoned, you know, somebody's private pond for their cattle operation, you know, 3-4 miles down the road. So
That's a lot of info. Thank you for doing it so succinctly in such a short period of time, because I know we could keep talking. But I mean, we haven't even, did we talk about the bees?
No, we have not talked about the bees.
36 colonies of the University of Nebraska bee
laboratory.
Bee laboratory collapsed, and I think they lost 1.5 to 2.16 million bees. But that's not because of the water spill. This has been happening since the plant opened in 2015, and then by 2017 they were seeing bee populations collapse in the area, because this is not just like wet stuff. This is dust, you know, like that moves around. And then we also didn't talk about the cattle, but I'm going to add Jason to the stream right now. Hello, Jason. Jason is from the Ogallala Oyate and has also been at the front lines, seeing and watching and what's happening. And I would love if you could also weigh in a little bit about the cattle, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. First, I'd like to apologize for speaking before my relatives and members of my family that have a perspective that runs much deeper than mine. But I will speak to what I know about these things. First, a little bit of background. I grew up in Gordon, Nebraska, a mixed family. I had relatives, farmers, ranchers, and native peoples in my family background. A lot of whom were all three things at the same time. And one thing that we kind of found years and years ago that none of this is entirely unexpected. These are not new issues. This has been going on a long time, and so frankly, I can't act like I'm shocked that we're still having these kinds of things happen. For an example, when I was a kid, we experienced firsthand. We had a feedlot that my grandpa actually used to run, and shortly after he sold it, the new owner that took it was not practicing good methods of dealing with some of the waste and was applying it directly to the field, which was running into our watershed and ran directly into a pond that we had trout in and we fished in, and it immediately caused bacterial bloom and issues that killed off the fish. And that was kind of my first experience being directly impacted by these bad practices by these absentee landowners that I have to assume that since they're not living on the front lines of their actions, they don't feel it like those on the front line do. And I think that kind of gets at the heart of a lot of these problems is these big corporations, they're ran and owned, and these decisions are not being made by the people that live in these communities, and they're not facing the direct impact of it often. So as far as the cattle are concerned, growing up in an area like this, I'm pretty used to what a feedlot smells like. I'm pretty used to, I've been around ethanol plants, but this isn't something entirely different we're dealing with here. When I first came upon that spill and documented it, you could smell what I assume were the pesticides and the herbicides and some of the chemicals that had made its way into that watershed. It was something different. And I think this is what concerns us so much about this is in a lot of ways uncharted territory. We've never seen something of this scale. Then the numbers are completely off the scale as far as how much contamination there is in this water. And I think as we go forward, we're just kind of beginning to get an idea of how bad this could be. And I hope some of the additional speakers coming up can speak to this more professionally. I'm kind of one of those, I know a little bit about a lot of things, but I'm not really a professional in any one thing. I just have my life experiences to inform me. You do know a lot, though, about what's going on in Nebraska in terms of the environment, and I really appreciate that. I would love to hear also, I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt too much, but I can't wait to hear as well about the cattle. And I appreciate everything you've been doing. Thank you. Well, I would prefer that we were raising buffalo, not cattle, but that's just me, but, we have to realize how much some of these systems have changed, back in the early days, the cattle were raised in a much more sustainable way. We didn't have these, as many or as concentrated feedlots like we have now. I think cattle were mostly raised and fattened, on grass. And as the days have gone on, we've seen more and more of kind of a confined feeding operation approach to cattle raising, I think. I would appreciate any feedback from any old school ranchers we might have in these circles, because what I'm seeing out here in eastern Nebraska and these operations is not what I'm used to seeing out where I'm from, Sand Hills, Nebraska. It definitely seems like we're kind of going down this road with cattle that they've already gone down in Iowa with pork and chickens and that sort of thing. And that's something that concerns me. And I can remember a lot of my relatives years ago that were in the industry, kind of expressed a lot of concerns about where the future of ranching and stuff like that was going, because they could kind of sense that as things became more mechanized and more kind of off the range and more into like a factory farming kind of situation, that it was going to threaten their livelihood. And I think, the history of that business or calling in this state, you can definitely see that. The community I grew up in has lost so many local ag-related people over the years, as these businesses have kind of become more factory-like in the way they've approached producing our food. It's caused a lot of issues for these communities too. I can remember years ago, a lot of my native relatives used to get together with, my settler relatives, and they used to kind of tease them a little bit and say, hey, you guys are going to be you're the next natives in these rural areas. These things they did to us, they're going to do to you now. And, this is, I'm 50 years old. This is stuff I was hearing when I was a kid. And, that's what happened. So I think going forward, we need to kind of understand that a lot of these issues they're facing in rural areas now are issues that native people faced before them. And we need to really think about how a sustainable future helps everyone. It's not something that's just about one particular cultural belief or one particular claim to the land. It's something that really, as human beings, we all need.
Absolutely. It reminds me of the Dakota Access Pipeline fight in Iowa, and how I would talk about the abuse of eminent domain. But I'd always say, well, remember, underneath that land, that bought land, lies a stratified history of, peoples that were here before all of this, so yeah, that's what's going on. And, I appreciate you being there at the front line with Mahmoud, doing this work, seeing firsthand what's happening. You guys were like the first on the ground there to really make an impact, and it's very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And about the cattle, though, this is an important point to make, because, the same people that own AltEn, and I'm going to add Mahmoud here, just in case I make a mistake. The same people that own AltEn also own Mead cattle. And so right beside the broken liner on one of these, toxic pits, cattle are grazing. And then, like, right in the vicinity where cattle are grazing, there's these piles and piles of toxic wet cake, that when it dries out, is like a dust in some ways, and is floating all over the place. These cows can actually just walk up this little, tiny little hill and go drink from that pond, or they can, I'm sure that this stuff is floating in the area. And then this cattle is sold for food for people. That is just so disturbing to me. And did I tell this right?
Yeah. There's cattle being grazed all around it. I mean, the whole entire Mead Cattle Company operation is basically set within the campus of AltEn, where they're producing.
Yeah, so you have the AltEn grounds, and then you have cattle all around, and then you have the University of Nebraska labs, somewhere nearby, and then you have people in Mead themselves that are suffering from serious health effects since that plant has been put in place, like nosebleeds, headaches, migraines, pussy eyes. I don't even. They have high cancer rates. They're having miscarriages, from what we're being told from like local people. We can't necessarily say that that's a correlation, but we're just saying that this is what people are telling us. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I think that we should get to the video that we just finished editing today. And after that, we can talk to some more of our powerful relatives about what's going on there.
When they had that leak, it was a nightmare. They started, I thought, with field corn. I'm not sure when they changed to seed corn. The town was never aware of any permission to do this. We have our own well for water, and they hit water at 40 feet. And in a million years, you're not going to convince me that after 2 or 3 years of all of this toxin leaching into the ground with no barrier, that groundwater won't be contaminated to a degree. I have a video that shows them installing one of the liners in the lagoons when they first did the lagoons, and the liner was torn when they put it in. It was already torn. So it's been leaking forever.
Up to 98%
Yeah.
of all treated seed corn in North America, not just the United States, but like Mexico, the United States, and Canada was being funneled into Little Mead, Nebraska, a village of like 700 folks, 500 to 700 folks, right?
Yes.
Poisoning. I mean,
it is.
You're being funneled all the poisonous waste from large manufacturers like Bayer and Syngenta, multi-billion-dollar agricultural facilities, you know.
Yep.
Well,
ground conditioner is not regulated. It's not regulated like fertilizers, etc. are. So when they labeled it ground conditioner, they were able to bypass having to have all these regulations put on them, and no department knew exactly what to do.
This all began sort of with the bees. They were finding the collapsed colonies, and the manner in which they were finding the dead bees, they were having their tongues stuck out, and that's kind of a neurological type of sign that the bees were experiencing a poisoning.
I have coughed for 3 years, coughed and congested for 3 years. I finally went to a specialist. He said he was pretty sure it was environmental. Got a private donor, and they are funding health screenings for us out here, water testing, soil testing, wildlife testing, and production animals, because I've been trying to get the Department of Ag to get back to me about the cattle at Mead Cattle Company. It's the same area, the same people did own it. What if some of that stuff blew onto their food and they eat it, and then we're going to eat those cattle?
Yeah.
AltEn isn't supposed to, they have to be the ones to clean it up. But I still worry about them declaring bankruptcy and walking away. Since they did it once, there's no compliance and there seems to be no punishment. Everybody just has this attitude that it's not going to affect us. It'll affect Ashland and Gretna and West Omaha towards the south and Lincoln and all the towns further down.
In your opinion, has AltEn forfeited its ability to clean this up?
Yes.
Should this be in the state of Nebraska's hands at this point? Do you feel that Nebraska has forfeited its ability as well?
Probably, yeah. I think the federal government needs to step in and do whatever they need to do.
So that is an amalgamation of the footage that was taken by frontliners on the ground during the spill and after the spill. And it basically depicts, of course, it shows you straight up what's going on. And this was an interview done by Great Plains Action Society and Nebraska Stand with Jody Wabel, who is a local resident of Mead, Nebraska, and who has been resisting AltEn for many years now. And obviously she has a lot to say. And there was so much more we would have liked to have put in to this video. But of course, you know, we wanted to get the major points across. Our next guest speaker is Kateri Pato, and I'm going to add you now, Kateri. And Kateri is from the Omaha Nation, and I don't quite know how to title your job. Pharmacist?
Yeah. So I'm a pharmacist.
A pharmacist.
Sorry, I got really teary-eyed just watching that video. I mean,
I know it's pretty heavy.
Yeah.
Take your time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess I can introduce myself. But my name is Kateri Hinman Pato, and I am an enrolled member of the Winnebago tribe of Nebraska, but I have Omaha and Ho-Chunk roots. I grew up here in the city of Omaha, so it's very alarming to know that, you know, that this is happening in our backyard. And, you know, just as, you know, an Omaha person, you know, these are our ancestral homelands, and it's, God, I'm sorry. It just really.
You know what?
That's.
So we can just take a minute here. You know,
it's just hard to see that in, you know, just knowing how sacred this land is, and how sacred our water is, and you know, these are resources that we. You know, once we ruin them, that's it. I think about that teaching. You know, that the land, our Mother Earth, is not ours. You know, we're simply borrowing it from our children. And that, man, that just is really hard to see.
The negligence gets to me. You know, just to think that, like, that money is so important that they can just do this. I mean, this is we've been calling, well, not we, but it was already termed this by somebody, a doctor or somebody, that this is the next Flint.
Yeah.
That's how terrible this is. And so, I understand that you have emotion right now.
It's one thing to read about it, but then to actually see it, it's just, wow. I mean, I want to thank you guys for, I have so much respect for, our environmental activists in our community that are on the front lines and really doing the work that we need. Because I was talking to my mom right before I popped on this call, and she was saying that she hadn't even heard about what was going on in Mead, Nebraska. And I mean, it's just so important to raise awareness. I also think it's very important to uplift Indigenous voices, because, we really do have a duty to this land to be stewards of it and fight for environmental justice. Yeah, so sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, it's
so emotional. That's just,
thank you, and the thanks goes to Nebraska Stand, who has been there like since the beginning to document this.
Yeah.
It's it's a very important point to make that we celebrate Indigenous resistance to these atrocities, because we've been doing it. It's in our blood, I do want to ask, though, because of your specialty, and that's why we asked you to be here, if you can tell us more. I don't know about these pesticides.
Yeah,
I
so
think I pronounced it Neonicotinoid.
Yeah, so yeah, so first I just want to kind of go over my background, just so one, I want to say I'm not a neuroscientist or an expert in this area, but my training, I graduated from Creighton with my PharmD this past May. But prior to that, I was a student at the University of Nebraska, Omaha, and I studied general chemistry, as well as Native American studies. And so a lot of my chemistry background within the university was focused in quantitative chemical analysis. And so some of our projects, we actually tested soil samples from North Omaha and measured the lead content within the soil. And so that was, an environmental crisis that we're still dealing with here in our own city. But so I do have some experience using high performance liquid chromatography and mass spectrometry to measure contaminants in our environment. Things that we are known to have caused negative health outcomes and have, notably are public health crises. Yeah, so kind of following on the neonicotinoids. So this AltEn pipe break led to high amounts of these neonicotinoids, just because they were processing seeds that were saturated in pesticides that fall into that neonicotinoid class. And so one thing I really want to point out is that neonicotinoids are a pretty new insecticide, and they've actually been banned in many countries, particularly by the European Union. Basically just outlawed them after some studies that have shown some of the negative health outcomes. But they are largely used here in the Americas, especially in North America. And how they work is they are similar to a chemical that we have within our bodies. So in both mammals and in insects, we have the nicotinic anticholinergic receptor. And so their purpose by spraying these seeds with these insecticides is that if insects get to those seeds and ingest the neonicotinoid, it will cause toxicity to the central nervous system, and then those bugs die, and that protects the plants. Now, what they've found in some of these studies is that even just using them for agricultural purposes have led to them, being found in the human body just from consumption of different products. So there were a couple studies that I looked at. One of them was in Greece, where they looked at both, they looked for metabolites of these neonicotinoids in the urine and in blood of people that were living both in rural areas as well as in urban settings. And in both populations, they were found. So that's pretty alarming. So I guess to just kind of go through just how this affects the human body. So we have nicotinic receptors in our body, and they're really essential with how our body functions from day to day. So they're involved in just different chemical pathways in our brain, as well as in our periphery or throughout our body, to allow for like these neurochemical signals, to, basically just to allow our cells to talk. So even, just me lifting my arm up is there's action through these nicotinic receptors. So to really be able to pinpoint just all of the different effects that these can have, I mean, it's just too hard to quantify, just because you're just involved in so many different biological processes. But anywho, what they found is that these neonicotinoids actually stay around. They have like what they call a longer half-life, meaning it takes a longer time for these chemicals to break down. And so with repeated use, they start to accumulate in the soil. And then that allows for higher concentrations to be found in, the foods that we eat, or even ingested into like things like you guys were talking about with cattle, which is pretty frightening, because then, that gets then passed on to us. And so that's, I think, essentially why a lot of these other countries have banned the use of them. And, because they are so new, it's really hard to say, long-term health effects that they'll have on humans. There have been some studies in mammals, so primarily just in mice, where they found different types of toxicities. So they're associated with neurotoxicity. And even some of the studies looking at humans that have had high concentrations of these, really the focus was on finding impairment in fetal development, and just different, babies being born with birth defects. And there's also been studies that have shown that they've been responsible for hepatotoxicity, or just having a negative effect on the liver. Your liver kind of serves as a filter for basically any toxin that comes through the body. And so just having large amounts of exposure can cause a lot of damage to that organ, which, is kind of your body's defense against coming in contact with these toxins. There's also been negative reproductive effects seen in mice, and as well as an association between just changes in our DNA causing mutations that, ultimately results in developing cancer. So, I mean, it's really scary to know that this is happening, essentially in our backyard. And, just the little action that's being done is, it really is frightening. And I think that analogy of, comparing where we're at here in Nebraska to being the next Flint, Michigan, I don't think that that's really all that far off.
It's not. I mean, this is a massive catastrophe. I mean, the parts per billion that are considered safe, 70 parts per billion, has been long surpassed by, I think it's at 240,000 parts per billion right now in the area of these I can't say it.
You call them neonics.
Neonics, thank you. Mm-hmm. And so, it's very disturbing. And I want to thank you for giving us that insight, especially, as an Indigenous person. And I'm sorry, I'm terribly sorry. I introduced you from the Omaha Nation. I don't know why I did that. So please forgive me. Yeah. I just really appreciate your insight on this. And, we should definitely talk more about like what we can do to bring light to what's going on. So Thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. And I do want to also point out that I just did a really quick literature search to see what I could find about toxicity with, the neonics and mammals. And I mean, there's a lot of data and literature out there to support that, hey, this is something that we should be alarmed about. So, I want to say thank you for, sharing this platform and allowing me to be a part of this. And I, really hope that collectively, getting the word out there that we can raise awareness and hopefully elicit some sort of action.
We're doing it right now. You know, there's no other footage like what we've just put out. There's none. This is the first footage that's like out there like this. So, thank you to Nebraska Stand for that. And then of course, how we're weighing in, this is important. And so, yeah, we will definitely have to talk more as time goes on and make sure that we keep our voices loud and clear. So thank you so much. And
Thank
have a good
you. You too.
Our next guest speaker is Trisha Altinger. I can't help but be kind of silly when Trish comes on because she's the operations director at Great Plains Action Society. And, we've been working together for a long time. Trish is from the Winnebago Nation, and she's also been working closely with Nebraska Stand and, behind the scenes. And I think it's important that we hear perspectives from Indigenous peoples in Nebraska on this topic. So take it away, Trish.
For sure. My name is Trisha Etchinger, and I'm from the Winnebago tribe of Nebraska. And I basically just introduced myself in the Ho Chunk language. I said good evening. I greet each and every one of you. So this Mead plant, I had no idea that this was going on. And it came to light when Mahmoud had mentioned this to us, and he's like, hey, he's out here doing the KXL work and, seeing all the illegal stuff that they're doing. And then they fall upon, the Mead plant. And I was very fortunate enough to talk with Jody about what was going on, and my mind was blown. There's, residents that have health disparities because of this. And I think that Mahmoud had talked to one of the workers too as well, just saying that they don't care. They don't care at all. What is really surprising to me is that this is not that far away from Boys Town, the Boys Town area. And as we know, like Winnebago's, Omaha's, Boys Town is a place to go to, and Boys Town is like a area of Omaha, but there is actually like a Boys Town, where at risk youth can go to if they need help, whatever. This is right outside the limits, like where Mead is at. So it really concerns me that the city of Omaha has not blinked an eye, has not even said anything. No local media has said anything. And it's, if Mahmoud and Jason were not out there doing the grassroots work of this, which, I have my own thing with, we want to be collaborative, but at the same time, like, we have to give credit to where the credit is due. And the grassroots people that are on the ground, in the boots, doing this work, they got out there and they helped Jody, as far as getting her message out. So from the Indigenous perspective, yes, this is very upsetting. It hurts to know that this keeps going on. However, this isn't something that's new to us. We've dealt with this for over 500 years. We now have toxins in the water. So it's just really, really mind-boggling to know that this is going on and there's nothing. There is no legislation. There is no one saying anything as far as, the corporate side. And of course, why not? Why would they? They never do anyway. So now there's
even a town hall tomorrow, I believe.
Yep, there is a town hall.
Is there Indigenous representation in that?
I don't know at this point in time. I would have to talk to Mahmoud about that, but hopefully I would like to speak at that because these are the original homelands of, the native peoples. And it's just a continuation of genocide, biochemical war, just the rape of the land, basically. Sorry for my trigger warning, but this is nothing new. It keeps going on. And, we are trying to help Jody get the message out to people that need to know this. If you live within this area, this concerns you. If you are traveling to Omaha in that area, this concerns you. So if you have people or relatives that are in the Boys Town area, this concerns you. So she shared some photos with me, footage as far as like where the toxic waste is being at or being dumped into, and nobody's doing anything. And these residents are still living in that. I can't fathom what it would be like to live in that area and to smell, to experience the nosebleeds, the headaches, I really hope that, that these bureaucracies and, these agencies and everything like that, I really hope that they get their act together and they really do something about this, because there are 700 people in the village of Mead that really need that help right now. And that's just in that area. This is going to, definitely spread to other areas as well. We always talk about this, it's imaginary line, right? Is it really though? It just doesn't stop at the imaginary line. It does not stop at the
hey, I'm at a border. I'm just gonna stop
right
now.
Like, oh, I'm gonna stop right here because I'm this is Iowa now, or this is this county, I'm gonna stop. No, it doesn't stop. So we have to get this out. We have to raise the awareness about it. And I hope that the media does something about this as far as really accurately doing their homework and saying, hey, you guys need to know about this. If you don't know about it, here it is. There is a town hall meeting tomorrow. I believe it's on, there's the Facebook event. I believe it's called AltEn Mead County or something like that. But definitely check it out. There's a Zoom link. I am hoping to get on there to kind of give the Indigenous perspective too as well, because it is important. We need to talk about this.
Nebraska stand representatives and like someone like yourself or Vitus or Kateri, because you guys are the experts in many ways as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is like I said, this is very mind-boggling, and I'm very happy that we're doing this this live stream today so that we can help in the future with other things that are that are around, like the KXL. This all happened because Mahmoud and Jason were out there doing work for the KXL pipeline, right? Or not work for, but they were monitoring it and keeping tabs. But then they fell into this, so it's like I said, much thanks to the grassroots people that are out there and doing that and exposing that. And I do think that the Guardian was the one that really kind of pushed that story out there and got it out there too as well. So I want to make sure that the Guardian is also being credited for that, because I don't think nobody knew anything at this point in time. So
I believe the Guardian is using some of Nebraska Stand's pictures too.
Yeah. Yep. So, but yeah, that's all I wanted to say is just make sure that you're aware. And this, like I said, if you live in these areas or you travel to Boys Town, or not even that, if you travel to Omaha, you need to make some noise. We need to stand up and tell them, no, you cannot do this. We need to pass legislation, and not just in Nebraska. We also need to do it for everybody else. South Dakota, Iowa, they're big ag states. So if Nebraska can do it, then, what does that mean for South Dakota, Iowa, and this is going to affect, if we don't raise the bar on this, it's just going to keep happening. So
absolutely. Thank you so much, Trish. I know you've had a really good day. Great Plains is also working on a really large MMIR initiative right now, and Trish is in the middle of all that. So thank you for taking it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Talk to you later. Our next guest is Vitus Stabler, and she is a citizen of the Omaha Nation. And I'm very happy and honored to introduce her here into this space. Hello, Vida. Oh, you're on mute. You have to take mute off.
Okay,
There we go. Oh, now you're, oh, there we go. Perfect.
good now. Okay. First, thank you, Mahmoud, for inviting me to do this. I've been listening to the speakers before me, and it's been just like what Trish and the Hinman lady said. It's been an eye opener for me too. And I also read the Guardian account, and that was my first realization of what had happened. But hearing all of you speak, it's my eyes are opened even wider, and that really does bring to question, how do we educate the people around us? I think Trish tapped into this a little bit about the media and how do we get the word out there. And you know what I think it's going to be? Quite frankly, it's going to come down to dollars and money and consumerism and all that, because all the people who are going to be affected by this, the land values are going to be decreased. Somewhere, somehow, this will get out and their property values will decrease. People willing to build in certain areas, they'll question that. And it's a sad scenario, because it's sad that it has to come down to money, for one thing. Consumerism, capitalism, all of that, because it's not about that. With our Omaha people and other indigenous peoples of this land, it isn't about that. It's about taking walks. I was thinking about this the other day. In past years, when I would go for walks on the country roads, because I like to walk a lot, and at night, especially during lightning bug season, and the lightning bugs would be so thick, you would have to close your mouth. You couldn't visit with whoever was there with you, on those special nights when they're just so thick, you couldn't even talk, You try to talk, and then, you'd have to go like this and not talk because they were so thick. And the last few years, and I'm sure you've probably all noticed that too, they're there, but they're nothing like what they used to be. And so this issue of tainted land, water, air, this has all been happening for a long, long time. And I think what's happening along with that is people almost get desensitized to that, desensitized to hearing the chorus of birds that we all should be hearing in the morning, and we don't anymore. We might hear it. I hear a lot of birds here in Walt Hill, Nebraska. That's where I'm speaking from right now. But it's decreased. The variety of birds, all of that, nature, all the creation that Wakanda gave us, for our life, it's diminishing. It's diminishing so much, and how people cannot be angered about this and hurt, and just like the couple of the younger people who spoke before me, shedding tears. I was that way too. As I watched that video, I was shedding tears and like covering my eyes and my mouth, because it was just so hard to see that. But yet that's what we need to do, is bombard. We need to bombard our communities with that. And it's almost like out of sight, out of mind, and out of heart. Out of sight, out of mind, and out of heart. That's what's happened to people because of consumerism and the media pushing value systems that aren't of a deeper level of what we need and what we know we need to be as human beings. As part of my just being curious and looking into the waterways, I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself. I am a culture director, and I document culture. And in my work of documenting culture, I document many elders from our tribe, the Omaha tribe, the people that go against the current. Nebraska, which is broad, flat waters, and flat waters. I mean, all those are Omaha words, speaking to the design of this land, the design of our waterways, and it just, you have to ask yourself the question: how do we get this way? It's such a hard thing. to leave to our grandchildren and our children to come. And I do know this, though, we need to somehow, there's got to be a way to, and I know many of you, Mahmoud and those water protectors, we even lost one of them. I never got to meet her, but I understand she just recently passed. You can't help but think about those 10 years, that people have put into that. And even before that, in my work of documenting elders, they would talk about being able to go to springs. That was their water source. Springs that flow in abundance all throughout here, on our reservation. There's springs everywhere. In Macy, all along there's springs, little bubbling water that comes out of the earth. And down bottom, by Big Elk Park, you can hike up to those Nihongas, water leaders, we call them. And you can find them. Our people used to, and all Native people that passed through here followed water. They followed water. That was their road, just to be close to the water, to be close to the fish, to be close to the animals that drank from those water sources. And how clean that was. That was not that long ago when I document the elders that they talk about being able to drink from that water. One of the grandmas, when I documented her recently, she took me to her family home site, and she talked about how when we walked upon her land, she said, this was our playground. She talked about moving big boulders along the stream and blocking the water. And this was our swimming pool, she said. They would fill up the water so they could swim in it. And the trees she said, this was our jungle gym. And I would think to myself, wow, that was beautiful life to have been able to have that. And so in our documentation, what that urged me to do, then about 8 years ago, I started kayaking, and I decided to get an up close and personal look at our waterways. And my thought was I wanted to be on every body of water that I thought our Omaha people would have been on. So I started my kayaking Logan Creek, which is just, it flows all along this, just the western border of Thurston County, comes down, and then it merges with the Elkhorn, and then so on and so on. So I started doing current first in Logan Creek. First thing I noticed in those years, 8 years ago, was it was devoid of life. Really, it was just like a dirty waterway, and I thought, wow. And then there'd be bubbling stuff in the water, and right away I recognized that it was dirty, it was tainted, it was unhealthy. But I did that because I needed to get experience with current. Later on, I talked to a resident of Pender, and he said, when he saw me kayaking one day, and he said, we used to kayak there, and we used to be able to reach over and get raspberries right off the bank, eat raspberries as we were going down in tubes. That's no longer there. And now, even with this, I've kayaked the Platte and the Elkhorn and the Missouri. I've kayaked those bodies of current, and I've been in that water, and they're all anymore. I take trash bags, and I'm usually going around and picking up trash as I kayak. I did have something good happen, though, about 2 years ago, before the floods, the second, third flood. And that was when I was kayaking, and I was down by Decatur on the Missouri, and I saw those little mollusks floating right along this edge of the water. And that made me feel good, because those kind of shellfish were still in existence, in our Missouri River back then. That was, like I said, about 3 years ago now. And I don't know, as I kayaked today was my first day on the water. And an interesting thing happened as I was on Lake Summit. It's right west of Tacoma. And as I was kayaking, I was glad to see a couple other kayakers there, but mostly it was boaters, fishermen. When I was kayaking quietly along the edge of the water, one of the fishermen got irritated with me because I went over his line, his fishing line. And it made me think as I passed by him, it made me think about how they're fighting for whatever little bit of water. That was him saying, hey, this is my space of water here, and you just went in it, and it's such a small little lake, you know. And I was thinking to myself, it made me ponder, you know, the idea of they want water too. They want good water too. They just don't know it because their mind is so clouded right now that they can't see it. But deep down, they do want clean water. They just aren't aware. They're so out of touch. They're so out of touch with what's important in life, you know, and just those people at the lake there are trying to grab just what little they can. Can you imagine when the masses of people become aware, when they actually become aware of where we stand and their eyes are open and they're woke, you know, it's going to lead to a lot of real difficult times there. If you look at maps and you look at waterway, one of the thoughts I had when I was seeing how they all converge in the corner of the southeastern corner of Nebraska, you know, as they start going towards the Missouri, it's like veins. It's like made me think of a human body and how we have all this circulatory system of blood, and it just even left me with the thought of how this waterway and it's the lifeblood of our earth, and they're just, I hope it's not too late, you know, for us to do something about it. But I do know this: we need to have, Nebraska needs to, the state of Nebraska, you know, they need to stand up and do something. The fact that they let AltEn get away with what they've gotten away to this point is, what is that? It's a privilege. It's a privilege that they have as an industry that regular folk don't have. Industry seems to have all this power, and I don't know why they're given that power, but they are, and nobody's watching them. Something's got to be done about that. I don't know. Maybe people need to get together, you know, more so than what there is. As a teacher, I'm also a teacher. I talk about these issues with my students, and I feel like that might be the most I can do at this time in my life, is to be in a classroom with children and talk about these issues. And maybe that's what all the teachers in Nebraska should be doing, you know, and every public school, every private school, you know, they should be talking about these real issues of concern, real issues that'll mean something to our children now, but into the future. I'm not sure what my time is here, because it's kind of seemed like it was here. So just, you know, cut me off whenever you need to. I've enjoyed talking to you. Thank you. It's been an incredible learning experience for me to hear you all speak. I wanted to say thank you to the same people that have been thanked earlier, especially Great Plains Action Society and the Nebraska Stand Collective. Thank you for asking me to be here today.
It's been an honor to have you. You know, these perspectives, in my opinion, are of ultimate importance when we are fighting, you know, colonial capitalism, the climate crisis, you know, so social injustice. Indigenous peoples have the way forward, which is the reason why we were so heavily, you know, genocided in the first place, right? They don't want to listen to us. It's in complete opposition to how, you know, these imperialists want to run the world. So, you know, thank you so much, because it's a very important perspective.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I appreciate you being here, and I hope that we get to talk more soon. And like as a collective of people in the area, I think we definitely need to keep taking action.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, and have a good evening.
Thank you.
I'm sad actually to see, it's funny, you know, you do this work and then you kind of forget how terrible it is sometimes when you're, you know, trying to create a video or you're trying to put something like this together, and then you see people's reactions and realize like how terrible this is. I want to add Mahmoud and Jason back to the stream here, because The two of them, as I've said earlier, are the experts on what's going on there. And I wanted to just, before we sign off, I want to make a couple quick notes that I want to make sure we talk about a couple things. Firstly, a few people have asked about the video. And yes, we will be uploading it to Nebraska Stand and Great Plains Action Society social media sites, on our Facebook sites, and then putting links, from Instagram to it, and then also to our YouTube pages, and then even on Twitter. But Mahmoud, I was hoping you could quickly tell us about the biochar unit and what that's about, and how that's an attempt to mitigate this situation, but it's not really going to do much. And if we could do that quickly within just a couple minutes, I'd appreciate that.
All right. So as we mentioned, there's literally 840,000 tons or something like that, 3 times the original amount when the state initially told them back in 2017 not to storage the dry solids on the premises. Now that the state has stepped in, they've shut down AltEn, and they've essentially taken over the cleanup efforts until said time when the EPA will go ahead and take over from the state. If it is declared a Superfund site, which many people speculated it's heading in that direction. They've decided, probably for costs, again, we're talking about money, and there's just simply so much of this pesticide-laden grain storage improperly on the premises. They've decided that they're going to go ahead and start burning it rather than, hauling it off to a certified dump that's been lined and properly taken care of for toxic and hazardous waste materials, which again also has its own fees and structure of costs and so on. First of all, you'll have to haul it there. Second of all, you'd have to pay that disposable dump or landfill to storage it, et cetera, et cetera. So what they've done is the Nebraska Department of Environment and Energy has decided they're going to go ahead and burn all of the solids of the spent grains that are remaining after the ethanol production process. That's kind of concerning. They went in there, they've erected a huge biochar unit, which is essentially like a boiler or a furnace. They dump it in, they burn it or crisp it, I guess, to the point where it just chars. And they really like to highlight that. But I mean, we all know that it's essentially, burning it or producing a combustible reaction. I don't know what the health effects of that are. What are the quality of air now of the people of Mead, Nebraska? They've already been subjected to years of environmental pollution and upper respiratory disease, ailments, nosebleeds, headaches, so on and so forth, pus in the eyes and things like that. Now we're going to go ahead and burn it. We're going to release a bunch of this toxin into the air right there in Mead, Nebraska. I don't know if that's great. We talked with Jody Wabel, and she said that she had a lot of concern about it. And she's tried contacting the various state agencies, of course, the Nebraska Department of Environment and Energy, as well as the Nebraska Department of Agriculture. And because there's an active lawsuit, nobody from the state, none of the state officials will do anything to assuage that community's concerns. Indeed, they were trying to have a town hall earlier, and the state informed them that they would not show up. I don't know. That's not the type of oversight. That's not the type of stewardship we're looking for. I mean, the state does have a public trust responsibility according to the law that they need to be holding our resources and our public health in public trust. Have they failed that? In my opinion, yes. I don't know. I guess the people of Nebraska will have to decide that and act accordingly as we move forward together. But the biochar unit's set up, and you can see they have very large, I guess it's nylon bags, kind of like what you'd see, those big blue bags at IKEA. They got something like that. They're about the size of a car. So they're taking massive amounts of this. They're burning it to the point where it's not fully burned, but it's charred, is what they call it, biochar. And then they're dumping it into these bags, and they're storing these bags. I guess that what they're going to do is they're going to test them to ensure that the pesticides are down to a manageable number. And then I guess they're going to put that out as soil remediation, kind of the same idea of what AltEn was doing. But they feel that by crisping it or biocharring it, it's going to remove some of the pesticide to the point where it's safer. With regard to the liquid waste and those leaking lagoons that we saw, the 3 of them there in the drone footage, they've decided that the state has said, well, we're just going to feed that produced wastewater into the boiler unit of the plant and steam it off. I mean, again, they've boiled this wastewater once in the ethanol manufacturing process, and it wasn't boiled at a temperature sufficient enough to denature or to get rid of the pesticides. And Dr. Judy Woosmart, a bee researcher over at the UNL facility, said, chemicals don't just disappear. I myself, an undergrad in chemistry background, and I understand as well, chemicals don't just disappear. You can combust them, they turn into other things, and they go floating off in the air. In the case of the biochar, if you're putting them into the boiler and you're steaming them off, certainly they're going to be emitting steam as well as particulates. So what are we really doing here? I mean, is this truly remediation? Are we also further risking the residents of Mead, Nebraska's health? What are the effects on the area? I mean, it's been windy out.
The thing I want to add is that, when you get to this point, there's nothing you can really do.
Yeah.
It's you know what I mean? It's toxic waste. Yep. So you have to basically, do what people do, right? They bury it somewhere. Mm-hmm. Or launch it off into space. I mean, literally, this is what I'm saying. You can't do anything with this. It's that toxic. And so burning it, steaming it, whatever it is they're doing, it's still not going to be okay. So we can't get to this place in the first place.
Yes.
We cannot allow this to ever happen where we get here. Mm-hmm. And that's the problem, is that there's no oversight. It's a good old boys club. It's the white heteropatriarchy. They're just doing their thing. They're continuing on with their mission of manifest destiny, doing whatever they want to the land because they think that they can and because it's for profit. And so that's really what the problem is. And also, I think it's important that we talk about the bill. And Jason, I don't know, are you familiar with that?
Not really. I know that there are some other people doing some good work and pursuing legislative remedies to these situations, but I would agree wholeheartly. We need to look at this much bigger than just this particular instance, because as I understand this bill, its goal is to prevent the use of these treated seeds in ethanol production. But I think ultimately that, what will be the next issue we run into, because there's a lot of issues that fit along these concerns with water and agricultural production that have been as big or bigger problem on a larger scale for a long time. We talked to some of our scientists that deal with water issues in the Gulf of Mexico. And, I know you've talked about this quite a bit before, the issues we've got in Iowa with that kind of runoff too. So I think one of the issues is this is so bad that there are people in government that know they have to make some attempt at doing something.
And then even this government, right? This
right. I mean,
it's is even trying to do something.
It's so over the top that they have to try to do something. But to me, we need to find a resolution of this issue. And like everyone said earlier, we're very concerned because, the people in Mead, they're still right in the middle of this. It's not like this coming to light is at all solve the issue for them. There's all these question marks that we've all got about this going forward. And I agree wholeheartedly. The question needs to be, more importantly, how do we prevent this stuff from happening in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, and Mead is just ground zero, because this is going to spread. And, the Todd Valley Aquifer sits above the Ogallala Aquifer. And, this is drinking water for how many millions downstream?
At least 60 million people.
Yeah. And then everybody was worried about KXL, and this was happening the whole entire time. And not just this. I mean, this is one of many, many things that is contaminating the water, as we know.
Yeah, I mean, I noticed, I'd like to give a shout out to Buffalo Bruce in the comments here. He's been involved in these issues for a long time. Mm-hmm. I know, I first heard about water issues when it came to uranium and Crow Butte and up by Crawford and up by the Black Hills. That's a huge environmental issue that still hasn't been resolved. I can remember the arguments when I was a kid, it's a matter of national security, and this even plays back to, we've even got to ask when we're talking about these bigger environmental issues that we have a just resolution to them. I was kind of shocked with all these issues that we've had in my part of the country and on Pine Ridge with the uranium mining up there. I mean, the one of the lakes I grew up learning how to swim in is got your very high amounts of uranium that have washed into it. I mean, to me, it's just, I'm getting wound up because it's like, how often do we have to come back to these things? And each time we look at it like it's an isolated instance. And,
I mean, that's what I'm saying. This is not. This is one of many issues happening.
I mean, there's so many water issues we're facing right now. I mean, we're looking at a bunch of large mines they're trying to do in southeastern Nebraska. We've got the carbon black production facility. We've got, I think it's Nobium mine, and all of these are having an incredible demand and potential impact on water and aquifers. Absolutely. I mean, it's mind-boggling.
Yeah.
I'd love to see if Bruce would be interested in getting on here and talking to kind of the historical context of some of these issues. Because like he says, he's been involved in litigation of this a long time. I mean, we've got a lot of people in the Native community that we've lost that were fighting this when I was a kid. I mean, all these issues, we all know, especially in, Native communities, this is nothing new at all. And I think that's a point we need to make when we get all these, the latest batch of allies, and they look at all these issues kind of independently. And, we have to remind them that this is an ongoing pattern of abuse. And until we kind of look at the root cause, we're going to have something else.
And that's what I want to, that's where I want to jump in here for a couple minutes, because all of this is due to colonial farming practices, which we really need to discuss as the root cause for this issue. Indigenous peoples, are obviously not perfect, right? But they were doing some pretty interesting things here before, people moved into these areas and, genocided us and removed us. There was a way of dealing with the land, of interacting with the land that is obviously very different from the idea that God gave man, dominion over the earth, like from that dogma, right? Mm-hmm. And so, these colonial farming practices are all about domination and, the bottom line and how much can you get out of a square foot? How much can you make it bleed, I'm speaking from, Iowa, but it's right next door, and the same thing is happening in Nebraska. Right now, Iowa is the #1 contributor to the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. It's like the most colonized, state, biologically colonized state in the country. And Nebraska is not far from that. And, the reason that this is the way it is because this is Big Ag's sacrifice zone, this area of the world. Iowa, Nebraska, Missouri, if you were to show like where are the least amount of natives, live right now, you can definitely make that correlation between like where Big Ag is located in the Midwest. And that's what we have to start discussing because it's the most insidious colonial practice that's taking place right now all over the world, but yet the least discussed and refuted, if you will, in our Indigenous communities, simply because they've done such a good job with propaganda and making it seem like this is a necessary practice and that the way they do it is necessary, especially with like, the population getting to be 10 billion, by the middle of the century, and with like droughts and the climate crisis and, we need this genetically modified material. We need to, we need pesticide-laden, corn because, we really need that for, for sustenance. But it's not even that. I mean, like here in Iowa, I can tell you that like the majority of the corn that is grown, and I believe it's 65% of it, goes towards the production of ethanol. And then it's just it's a whole cycle of things. It's intricately connected. And in the end, like we need to do a lot more about Big Ag in general, all over the world. And we need to recognize that that's actually like our biggest concern right now for the climate and for the land and the people and all living things on this planet is like how we grow our food and how we treat our food and how we treat each other and the land and everything around us while we do that.
Exactly. Carlos, I'd like to also mention that, you know, these are seed corns that they were disposing of from companies like Bayer or Syngenta. That also, what you were talking about, speaks to the fact that how much of this seed corn that's laced with pesticide is actually planted into the earth. How much of that pesticide is being leached into the earth in fields all over the Great Plains in the Midwest, Nebraska, Iowa, South Dakota, etc. How much of that is getting into the water table? How much is that contributing to various illnesses that we're seeing come up in these rural communities?
Yeah, it's a crisis beyond any magnitude I can really even begin to imagine. But it really comes down to dismantling colonial institutions, colonial practices, and that's, I mean, we need more people like Deb Haaland and Sharice Davids in office. You know, we need to win the 2022 elections, both in Nebraska and Iowa and all these other places where we didn't, so we can get people that want to make better decisions. Because in the end, it comes down to legislation, and I hate that. But everything we do comes down to somebody making a decision in government as to whether or not that something will continue or not continue, right? So that's what we have to do. We need more people running for office. I guess that's what we're going to do then.
We need to rematriate the lands.
Yeah, rematriate. We haven't even said that word. That's a very important word. We need to rematriate. We need to indigenize. We need to decolonize. All those things, very important terminologies, and you know, they mean a lot of different things. But essentially, what it comes down to is fighting the oppressor, fighting the colonizer, and ending, you know, colonial capitalism and consumer culture. Well, you know, we went way past our time of 8 o'clock, so it's 8:33. But you know, I appreciate everybody sticking with us, and the comments are amazing. I appreciate, you know, Connie Hinman, and Christy Sheldon and Nikki Caputo, you know, and so many others on here. Thank you, Buffalo Bruce as well, Lucid Thomas. Let's keep in touch, everybody. We'll have more updates for you. And tomorrow, if you're interested, I think there's a town hall. I don't know who's doing it, but I'm sure if you look in Facebook, Mead Town Hall, I think it's called, you can find that event. But yeah, we'll be putting up the video tonight on all of our sites, and so please share it. It's very important.
Yeah, they will be having that town hall tomorrow, I believe 7 p.m. in the town of Mead at the local church is where they're slated to be doing that. Okay, yeah, that's good. I'll put the link somewhere, maybe in the comments. Thank you so much, everybody. We really appreciate you being here with us today. This is a very serious issue, and we appreciate your time. And let's keep moving forward and making good change. Ai hai ki tata mihin.